Hey there. You ready to dive in?
Today, we're tackling a topic that's well everywhere these
Okay.
days, entitlement.
Right.
You shared this really insightful essay with us,
Hmm.
Entitlement in the Modern Age, a product of upbringing or a societal shift.
Yeah.
And, well, it got us thinking,
Okay.
is this everybody gets a trophy mentality really a generational thing?
Or is something bigger at play?
Yeah,
I've got our expert here with me to break it all down. What's
absolutely.
the first thing that jumps out at you about this essay?
Well, what I thought was so fascinating was how the essay defines entitlement right off the bat.
It's not just about feeling special.
Mm-hmm.
It's the expectation of privileges without actually putting in the work to earn them.
Right.
And that really sets the stage, I think, for the whole discussion.
It
And
does.
the essay dives right into this generational blame game.
Oh, yeah.
Boomers versus millennials versus Gen Z.
But it struck me that maybe we're too quick to slap labels on entire generations.
It's tempting to generalize.
But the essay reminds us that each generation comes with its own baggage and its own context.
Okay.
Take baby boomers, for instance.
What?
They're often painted as the hard-working generation that built it all.
Right, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps
Mhm.
generation.
Exactly.
And while that work ethic is certainly real, the essay highlights how they also benefited from a unique historical moment.
Post-World War II,
Okay.
the economy was booming, opportunities were abundant.
And there was a sense of optimism that's hard to imagine today.
Mm-hmm.
They were taught to value hard work,
Mm-hmm.
but they also had a system in place that supported their success.
So their upbringing wasn't just about the values, but also about the circumstances.
That's a really important distinction.
Yes.
It's like saying, yeah, they were told to work hard, but they also had a ladder to climb.
Basically.
Now shift the lens to Gen X.
Okay.
They inherited a different reality.
Economic shifts, globalization, the rise of automation created a sense of uncertainty that shaped their worldview.
It's interesting how the essay calls them the latchkey generation.
I feel like that term speaks volumes about their experience.
Absolutely.
Gen X often had to navigate things on their own,
Right.
with parents working longer hours or dealing with the fallout of economic changes.
This fostered a sense of independence, but perhaps also a degree of cynicism.
They learned to adapt and question the status quo because they saw firsthand that the old rules didn't always apply.
Which brings us to my generation, the millennials.
We were raised on this diet of you can be anything you want to be.
Right.
We were encouraged to follow our passions, chase our dreams.
And the internet promised us a world of endless possibilities.
And this wasn't entirely untrue.
The internet did open up new avenues for creativity, connection, and entrepreneurship.
Right, but it also created this expectation that success was just a click away.
That if we were talented and worked hard enough, fame and fortune would magically follow.
The essay points out how this digital optimism might have set the stage for a sense of entitlement.
Especially when those dreams didn't materialize as easily as promised.
It's the gap between expectation and reality that often fuels feelings of entitlement.
Millennials entered a workforce ravaged by recession, burdened by student debt,
Yeah.
and facing a widening gap between the cost of living and stagnant wages.
It's almost like we were handed a map to El Dorado only to discover that the treasure was long gone by the time we arrived.
That's a striking way to put it.
And it helps explain why some millennials might feel disillusioned.
They were sold a dream, and while some achieved it, many others found themselves struggling in a system that felt rigged against them.
This isn't to say that millennials aren't hardworking,
Right.
but rather that their upbringing fostered a different set of expectations and anxieties.
And then there's Gen Z,
Right.
coming of age in a world of,
Climate change, economic uncertainty,
Yeah.
social unrest.
it really is.
It's a lot to process.
It's like they're inheriting the anxieties of every generation that came before them.
Plus a whole bunch of new ones unique to their time.
And they're hyper aware of these challenges.
They're digital natives. They've grown up with access to information on a scale we couldn't have imagined.
Right.
And they're not afraid to use their voices to advocate for change.
It's interesting how the essay connects this whole digital upbringing.
To the rise of what it calls main character syndrome.
Right.
I have to admit, I've totally fallen into that trap before.
Scrolling through social media,
Oh, yeah.
seeing everyone's highlight reels.
And thinking, wait, why isn't my life this glamorous?
It's a common experience in the age of curated online identities.
We're bombarded with images and narratives that emphasize individual achievement, happiness, and success.
It's easy to start seeing ourselves as the protagonists of our own lives
Right.
and to feel like we're somehow falling short if our reality doesn't measure up to the carefully constructed narratives we see online.
And the essay argues that this ties into entitlement.
It's like if everyone online is presenting themselves as extraordinary,
Yeah.
then we start to feel like we deserve that same level of recognition and reward,
Hmm.
even if we haven't necessarily put in the work to achieve it.
Exactly.
It creates this disconnect between the effort required for real-world achievement.
And the instant gratification culture fostered by social media.
Okay.
The essay isn't suggesting that young people are inherently narcissistic or lazy.
But rather that the digital landscape might be influencing their expectations and perceptions
Okay.
of what constitutes success and fulfillment.
So it's not just about individual entitlement. It's about how this digital environment might be shaping an entire generation's outlook.
It makes you wonder what happens when everyone believes they're the main character.
That's the question the essay grapples with as it explores the potential consequences of unchecked entitlement.
It paints a rather bleak picture of a future where hyper-individualism reigns supreme.
Imagine a society where social institutions crumble because people are too focused on their own needs to contribute to the collective good.
It's like instead of weaving a tapestry together,
We're all just hoarding our own individual threads, too busy comparing their color and texture to notice that the bigger picture is falling apart.
that's a powerful image.
And it highlights the potential consequences of prioritizing individual ambition over shared responsibility.
The essay warns of a future marked by social isolation, political instability, and a decline in empathy.
That's a sobering thought, isn't it?
This idea that a culture of entitlement could actually undermine the very foundations of society.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're trading long-term well-being for short-term gratification.
That's the crux of the issue.
And the essay doesn't shy away from the urgency of finding a different path.
Okay.
It argues that we need to rediscover the value of collective action.
Of understanding that our individual choices ripple outward and impact the world around us.
So how do we do that?
How do we shift from a me mentality to a we mentality?
Right.
Especially in a world that often feels so fragmented and divided.
It's a monumental task.
But the essay suggests it starts with education.
Okay.
And not just in the traditional sense.
It's about fostering empathy, encouraging critical thinking about the messages we consume,
Right.
and nurturing a sense of responsibility towards our communities and the planet.
It's like teaching people to be good citizens.
Not just in the civic sense, but in the broader sense of recognizing our interconnectedness and acting accordingly.
Precisely.
It's about understanding that our individual stories are threads in a larger social fabric.
Mm-hmm.
We can celebrate our own uniqueness while also recognizing that the strength and vibrancy of that fabric depend on the well-being of the whole.
It's about finding that balance.
Between individual ambition and collective responsibility.
Yes.
Because let's face it, we need both.
We need people striving for their dreams, pushing boundaries.
Right.
But we also need them to do so with an awareness of their impact on the world around them.
And that's where the essay leaves us with more of a challenge than a solution.
It asks, in a world obsessed with personal branding and achievement, how do we raise future generations to value both individual fulfillment and the well-being of the collective?
How do we cultivate a sense of purpose that extends beyond personal gain?
It's a question worth pondering, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Because it's not enough to simply critique entitlement.
We have to offer a compelling alternative,
Okay.
a vision of a future where success is measured not just by what we accumulate, but by how we contribute to something larger than ourselves.
Perhaps that's the most important takeaway from this deep dive.
It's not about pointing fingers or lamenting the downfall of society.
But about engaging in thoughtful, nuanced conversations about the values we want to uphold and the future we want to create.
It's about recognizing that the antidote to entitlement lies not in tearing each other down, but in building each other up.
Beautifully said.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that challenge, to consider how we can each contribute to a world where empathy, collaboration, and a sense of shared responsibility are not just aspirational ideals, but lived realities.
Until next time, keep asking the tough questions, keep diving deep, and keep searching for those threads that connect us all.